generational harm has been done to the United States. And I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet.
When we start talking about treason, everything they kind of do, it just is right on the edge of that treasonous mark. The head of the snake is Barack Obama, Frank.
In and out of the Beltway, from large cities to small towns to the rural heartland, from sea to shining sea. This is Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio, Inside the News.
Welcome back to another great show of Inside the News, Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio. And we've got the guys with us. We've got Frank Vernuccio and Ben Brunson. Good morning to you, or good afternoon to you, Ben Brunson.
Well, good day, gentlemen. I'm back in Florida and ready to go for another show.
All right. The heat is coming in. You know why we sent him back to Florida is to get this Artemis 2 up and running here. Right, Frank? How you doing, Frank?
Sounds like a good idea to me. Doing great. And of course, in New York, we're all excited. This is opening day week in New York, as it is in baseball around the country. The Mets and the Yankees both starting this week.
And that's one thing Kathy Hochul hasn't screwed up yet in that state.
Give her time. Give her time.
Okay, Frank, go.
Well, in the news today, one of those stories that kind of knocks your socks off. JB Pritzker from Illinois has blamed Donald Trump for the fact that an illegal alien killed yet someone, an American, yet again. You know, every political party has the right to have their own philosophy and their own thoughts, but at some point they are responsible to the public that they purport to serve to explain themselves. And when liberal Democrats, particularly in this case Pritzker, blames President Trump for the open borders of Joe Biden and for the lax policies on crime that liberals across the country, Democrats across the country engage in, it kind of does knock your socks off. And you wonder, how do they face the public with a straight face? The reason I'm bringing this up, we're going to talk about MarkWayne Mullin being confirmed. But the reality is, no matter what he does, no matter how good or bad he is, as long as you have local governments engaging in this type of nonsense, letting illegal aliens go free after crime, nothing is going to change. The country is really facing generational harm from Joe Biden's policies. A change in presidents is not going to be able to do it. When you have 25 million people, according to some estimates, being brought into the country, no vetting, nothing whatsoever, this is a problem that you're not going to get rid of in one term. It is absolutely a multi-generational issue, which the country is going to suffer from for a long, long time.
And Ben, the deep state is still real. It is still there. And Joe Kent, we're starting to learn a whole lot more underneath the surface of him quitting, because he didn't just quit. He was going to be fired anyways. There's investigations. And we need, I'll tell you what, MarkWayne Mullin, I like this guy. Ben, go.
Well, he's been confirmed as the new DHS secretary. It'll be nice if by the time this airs, the Democrats have decided to fund DHS. I still find it kind of shocking that in the middle of a war going on with Iran, we are not funding the Department of Homeland Security, in which, everyone acknowledges that the threats are quite real. We've had a number of terrorist attacks already. Fortunately, they were relatively minor lone wolf type attacks. But as we've talked about and others have pointed out, we had a completely open border for 4 years under Joe Biden, and thousands of people come over who are clearly terrorists or terrorist affiliated people. According to CIA analysts, there were a large number of trained terrorists who came across the border. We had an FBI who is the primary domestic counterterrorism agency, is the FBI. That's their foremost role. If you go back to the heyday of the FBI during World War II and the Cold War, that was their primary function, was to hunt down spies and agents working in this country. But under Biden, of course, that FBI was completely inculcated with woke ideology, and their primary function became hunting down what the president told them was the biggest threat in the country, which was white people and anyone who dared to vote for Donald Trump or support Donald Trump. So I can only imagine that we had people cross the border who are unfettered, and you're waiting really with you're waiting for the shoe to drop here in terms of a major terrorist attack in this country. A famous CIA analyst has said repeatedly that she believes there are well over 1,000 Al-Qaeda trained individuals in this country who are planning a coordinated attack that would look like the Mumbai attacks some years ago, where you have groups of armed men, heavily armed, who are in a fight to the death. Their goal is to kill as many Americans as they can by attacking New York City or major cities around the country simultaneously, going to a convention center, an event, a hotel, whatever it is, and just going around killing people until they are themselves killed. So this style attack would be horrendous. And she believes that, this is Sarah Adams I'm talking about, she believes that they believe they can kill well over 1,000 Americans in a coordinated attack along those lines. So this is a very real threat. It was enabled by Joe Biden and his awful administration. And, we had to we've had a year of trying to right the ship at the FBI and Homeland Security. And yet, the Democrats have pulled the plug on funding. People don't realize how much is under DHS. I mean, it's not just ICE and Border Patrol and the TSA. It's the Coast Guard. It is the cybersecurity, CISA, the Cybersecurity Intelligence Office. There are just a host of things all parked underneath DHS that the Democrats have defunded, while the threat is probably at the highest level in a very long time.
Frank, isn't Secret Service under DHS now? And what about Treasury? Because the Secret Service used to be under Treasury. Is that a separate entity?
Yeah, it used to be in the Treasury, but it is under DHS. But of course, the president is Donald Trump, so they're not particularly interested in protecting that president. Let's be very blunt about it. I want to add something to what Ben said. I think there are two possibilities of massive terrorist attacks. One is exactly as Ben outlined, but the other is the one that, as bad as what Ben outlined is, can have even more long-lasting effects on the nation. An author named Dan Perkins outlined a scenario in which the Al-Qaeda terrorists smuggled into the country, or in the case of Joe Biden's administration, walked openly into the country, attack oil refineries in the New Orleans area, Louisiana in general, which could certainly cripple the economy of the country for a considerable period of time. And I think that is a very likely possibility. And going back to Ben's point, for the Democrats to not fund Homeland Security at this point in time borders coming close to treason. We're dealing with a problem that we've faced for a long, long time, that the Democratic Party is more concerned with the good of the Democratic Party than with the good of the American people or the United States as a nation. And in this particular case, with an ongoing war, with the reality that terrorists are probably in significant numbers in the United States, for the Democrats to do this is, again, borders on treason.
We have been talking, the three of us on our program here for many, many years. By the way, this is program number 556. Just to let you know, we've been doing this for well over 10 years now. But Ben, when we start talking about treason, everything they kind of do, it just is right on the edge of that treasonous mark. And, they'll put a foot in there and they'll dabble in it, then they'll back it up just a little bit so it's not fully treason. But I like where Frank was going with this, Ben.
Well, I would say it goes way past the treasonous mark. I don't know about the funding issue, because that can be debated. But when the deep state ran an insurgency against Donald Trump during his first term in office, with based on hoaxes that everyone knew what were hoaxes. They knew exactly that who funded all the fabrication, all the backstories that came from the Hillary campaign. Everybody knew. Everybody involved. Brennan was involved. Obama was involved. That was discussed at the White House, and that was treasonous. That was absolutely treasonous. And to this date, no one's been held to account at all. Comey, Brennan, all these scumbags who engaged in a treasonous effort to bring down Trump's first term in office. They had a high degree of success. Unfortunately, they wrapped him up every way but Sunday in terms of his ability to get things done, litigated. They've had far less success the second time around, largely because we had an interim administration in which a lot of Americans, and I would dare say the vast majority of Americans, came to realize that what had happened to Trump during his first term, how bad it was. But that activity cannot be allowed to go unpunished. We have hung traitors for a lot less than what happened during Trump's first term in office. Frankly, it wouldn't bother me to see that type of punishment for the ringleaders who engaged in the hoax and the assault on Trump's first term in office. There has to be a payment to be made for this never to happen again.
Tulsi Gabbard has come out repeatedly and about Barack Obama. And this was right after he got out of office, and then Trump got into office at January 2017. Okay, it goes back that far that he did everything possible to undo that election because nobody thought that Trump was going to win. Everybody had planned. Everybody thought it was going to be Hillary Clinton. Well, when Ben was just talking there, the head of the snake is Barack Obama, Frank.
Yeah, and he had 3 terms, basically. The fact is that Joe Biden, obviously incompetent and incapable of exercising the duties of President of the United States, his administration was essentially being run by Barack Obama or Barack Obama's associates. And you look at some of the more irrational decisions, and it wasn't just us versus them or Democrat versus Republican, conservative versus liberal. The decisions made by the Biden administration were just irrational and seemed destined intentionally to harm the United States of America. The United States changed under the Obama administration. Yes. There's little doubt about that. If you do a curve in history, it took a sharp left turn under Barack Obama, and it continued through both Barack Obama terms and also into the Biden administration. Where we are at this point, again, as I started off at the opening of the show, saying that generational harm has been done to the United States, and I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet. We've seen, of course, the cost and crime and an expense of the illegal aliens who have come into the country. The latest news was that one of the illegal immigrants who killed an American again is carrying tuberculosis. How many more unvaccinated immigrants are in the United States spreading diseases that we haven't seen in generations in this country? How much more harm is going to be done?
Ben, fundamentally change America. That is what Barack Obama said. Fundamentally change. Go back to the Bush era from 2001 to 2009 when Bush then got out. Barack Obama comes in 2009. And what did he do? He started implanting these deep state cells. I'm going to call them cells, just like the terrorist cells that we're talking about, the border and immigration. That is exactly what Barack Obama did. He further corrupted USAID. Ben, go on.
Well, he started at the CIA. So let's go back to John Brennan. In 1976, by John Brennan's own admission, he voted for Gus Hall to be president of the United States. Why is that significant? Gus Hall was the Communist Party candidate for presidency. I think he received something like 200,000 votes out of the millions and millions cast. Anyone who voted for Gus Hall was a committed communist. John Brennan voted for Gus Hall. That made you completely unable to work for the CIA historically. The CIA under Angleton during the height of the Cold War spent tremendous resources hunting any communist or anyone with communist sympathies and getting them out of the CIA. John Brennan was named CIA director by Barack Obama. He owned Brennan, and it is unbelievable. You can start right there. The other thing you can look at is it was Barack Obama who opened the door to all these Islamic invaders into our country and turned, Dearborn, Michigan into a little Islamic state. He brought in the Somali refugees, totally unsuitable to be immigrants to this country because they share no values whatsoever that are suitable for Americans. Unlike the millions who come from Latin America, they come here for hard work. They believe in this country and the values. I'm totally open to them. But it was Barack Obama who corrupted our immigration process. So yes, he is wreaked havoc on this country, unfortunately.
All right. And remember the red line. You don't cross this red line. He put the sign in the sand, or the line in the sand there. Barack Obama, he didn't care if you crossed it. Go ahead. Bring over your tanks and everything else over that line. Well, you know what? When Donald Trump says this is the line, this is the line. And only he can move it, but he'll let you know ahead of time. We're going to talk about that line a whole lot more. Stick with us. This is Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio Inside the News with Ben, Frank, myself, Guy. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio Inside the News.
Welcome back to Inside the News. Frank Vernuccio, USAGovPolicy.com is his website, and he's with the American Analysis of News and Media. We've got Ben Brunson, author of a couple of books. You know what? If you would have read these when they were first published, it outlined everything we're witnessing now live in living color in, I'll tell you what, this is truly amazing. We are witnessing history. BenBrunson.com, Amazon.com. Look up those books. Okay, Ben, there's so many different facets here of Iran, do we close down Karg Island and be done with that? Are we going to reopen the Straits of Hormuz? Are there nukes? By the way, Ben, are there nukes involved in some of this stuff?
Well, if the Iranians have their way, the answer is absolutely yes. That is their desire. And here's the issue here. The question is, when is this war going to end and under what terms? Militarily, the outcome's already foregone conclusion. The Iranians are completely at the mercy of the Israeli and U.S. Air Forces right now. And they're being degraded continuously. The Israelis are turning their attention to the Basij and IRGC units that are on the streets. They are laying the groundwork by killing leadership and attacking, the stormtroopers who really harass the people and oppress the people of Iran, attacking them. They're going to drive them underground. And they're setting the stage for the coming revolution, which I think will be the end game here. Donald Trump has been willing to negotiate. Here's what I think Donald Trump is thinking when he's willing to negotiate with this regime. It's the analogy is similar to Putin. Putin will not give up his catastrophic war against Ukraine, even though it has completely destroyed Russia. It's destroyed them as a superpower. It's destroyed their economy. There's no capital left in Russia at this point. But he won't give it up because he feels that if he quits, he's a dead man walking. That's his mindset. You can argue whether that's true or not, but I think Donald Trump feels the same way about the regime. If the regime agrees to the terms that Trump has set on the table to give up their missile program, right, their nuclear program, they feel that that's their last straw. The people will rise up shortly after that and they'll be done. And it may turn out that way, but guaranteed we are working with lots of people and the regular army and identifying people. The CIA and the Mossad are very active, finding people who can lead a revolt against the regime. That is what's happening quietly behind the scenes. It will come because when 70 to 80% of the people want the regime gone, that tells me the revolution will come one way or another before this story is played out.
You know something, Frank, another thing we learned when Ben started talking about Russia and all, one thing Russia learned and what the whole world learned is that their weapons don't work. Okay. I mean, they went in there to Ukraine and they said, this is going to be, we'll get this done in 2 or 3 days. Well, our weapon systems are so far superior, and once again, down in Iran, where we're fighting this battle there, they're learning it again. Our weapons are far superior. China is now taking a look and say, maybe we don't have the heads up or the edge on everything like we thought, Frank.
Yeah, but let me go back to the question whether is Iran dead or not, and put it in historical context. There's always the leadership element. And when we're dealing with Iran, we're dealing with an irrational leadership, a leadership that simply believes in martyrdom, that believes that perhaps in the coming conflagration, the hidden imam will emerge. I mean, these people are religious fanatics. Iran demonstrated a unique capability the other day when they fired a missile that could reach Diego Garcia thousands of miles away.
Yes.
That kind of woke the Europeans up from their slumber, thinking this isn't our war, despite the fact that their oil comes from that part of the world. Towards the conclusion of the Second World War, after the Normandy invasion, Germany should rationally have offered unconditional surrender. It didn't. And in fact, it mounted the Battle of the Bulge, which came within a hair's breadth of turning the tide in the Second World War. It was only through the heroics of people like General Patton that, in fact, the Bulge battle didn't actually go in favor of the Nazis. Iran still, I think, has a lot of capability that is hidden. I think they have a number of long-range or intermediate-range long-range missiles, which they could still use. I fear that they might do just that. This war is not yet over. But to Ben's point, it has to be over. And to your point, Guy, as well, it'll be over when the people of Iran have the capability of revolting and overthrowing the mullahs. Unfortunately, despite the fact that maybe up to 90% of the population want to do just that, that 10%, and particularly IRGC, are the guys with the guns. And you could have 1,000 civilians against one guy with the gun, and that guy with the gun is going to do an awful lot of damage. Right now, the end game has got to be to arm the Iranian population one way or the other.
Ben, Frank brought up the most fascinating point here is that that missile that was going to Diego Garcia, and that it had that long of a range. I don't know, 2,500 to 4,000 miles. It's in there somewhere. You probably know that more than. That's when Europe took notice. They were saying, "Oh, we're fine. We're up here. You know, they're not going to read." That's when it took notice because Germany was in there, Italy was in there, and all those nations were up in that circle, that circumference. Ben.
Yeah, that brings all the capitals of Europe into range. That's technically an intermediate range ballistic missile. They're working hard on developing intercontinental range ballistic missiles, specifically to be able to hit the United States and to hold us hostage when they can put a nuke on the tips of these missiles. It just highlights how absolutely critical this war is, how essential it is. We waited, frankly, too long. We let them get too developed before we initiated this war, but you can't change that. What we can celebrate is that we have a leader willing to engage and take the action necessary to stop the world from being held hostage to a regime that's in-time eschatology. Their in-time belief is their job was to create global chaos so the Muhammad al-Mahdi could return from occultation. That is their belief system. It is coming to an end thanks to Donald Trump. It is absolutely critical. This war should be celebrated by everyone who believes that there should be a future for the planet, because that is how dangerous this regime was. And it can only end when there is no regime left. If you leave the regime in power, they will immediately go back to reconstituting and rebuilding, no matter how much we've destroyed what they've done. They'll go back to their old aims. So we'll just have to repeat this war again in 5 to 10 years. We need to complete the job now and get the regime out of power.
We see the hats. Trump was right about everything. Once again, when he went in and he's saying nothing but unconditional surrender. The man has got the stuff to do it. I'll tell you what, we are so blessed to have him as president. All right, we've got to turn around. We've got some other things to talk about. We'll talk about more about Congress and what's happening there. And I'll tell you what, just stick with us, grab that cup of coffee. We'll be right back on Wehman, Brunson, and Vernuccio.